we will transition to an open forum on climate change policy. And I think there as well, national and international, both the perspectives are very important to address. And for this session, we have invited Julia Behrens to give us the initial input. Julia Behrens is the Project Director of Climate and Energy in Asia at Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, located in Vietnam. The project supports partner organizations in working towards a socio-ecological transformation in Asia. And I must mention here that the work that we do in India as well, a big part of it also is supported by this project in Asia. Before joining FES, Julia drove environmental narratives and power structures and worked as a consultant for various organizations on intersectional feminism. She holds degrees in environment, culture, and communication from the University of Glasgow and in Southeastern Asian Studies from Humboldt University, Berlin, and has spent time studying and working in Vietnam, Thailand, and the US. Welcome, Julia, again. We've been in with breakout sessions off and on, but a pleasure to welcome you formally to the conference. And over to you for your inputs on climate change policy, after which we hope we will open the floor for discussions among participants as well. And we have a few experts here whom we would like to hear as well, but first looking forward to your input.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much to my colleagues, Dina and Renee, who've spoken before me and already managed to convey a lot of the messages that are important to Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. I will try to keep my remarks brief to allow some time for a discussion and also hear some more input from all of the participants, because what I also noticed throughout the program so far that we have so much expertise here. So thank you very much for the organizing committee to bringing all these great people together in this conference. So before I start explaining some of my thoughts on the issue of climate change policy, I would like to ask everyone to share some words, some associations they have with climate change policy that come up to their mind. So if you wouldn't mind, just type some words, spontaneous associations, thoughts you have into the chat box. Does it exist? Good point. Climate finance, renewable energy. It's tough. Yes, definitely. Disoriented. Disoriented might refer to the COP, what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. Feasibility, nowhere. Accountability, biofuel. Yes. All these are some really good associations. Misaligned and lack of accountability. You're also following the COP. Okay, great. So I see that you all have some negative observations of what is actually happening at the moment, but also there is hope and some vision in your associations of what climate change policy should look like. So maybe to start off, to ask the question, what is policy actually? What do we mean when we speak about policy? Policies are sets of guidelines. It can be laws, it can be plans, it can be ideas that regulate behavior in a certain situation. And these laws and guidelines are agreed upon by a group of people. It can be a government, but it can also be an organization. It can be a different assembly of different actors on different scales and levels. So basically it is some rules a certain group should stick to, in our case, in regard to fighting the climate crisis that is on our doorstep. There are different schools of ideas and thoughts on how important government policies are in meeting with the current challenges of the climate crisis. Some school of thoughts believe that governments are the key actors in strategies to fight climate change, while others believe that governments only set a certain framework, but that other actors, for example, the economy or individuals, citizens, or even consumers are the ones who are crucial for climate change policies. At Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, we believe that there is no way out of the climate crisis without state policies and government intervention, but also that these guidelines have to ensure that we stay below 1.5 degrees of global warming, and at the same time safeguard social, marginalized groups, and carry with them not only ecological implications, but they also should be socially responsible. What my colleague Dina just mentioned, we try to work towards climate justice and a just transition in the energy sector, so that current inequalities existing in the world are not perpetuated through policies trying to curb climate change. So, for example, this could mean that a transition away from coal and towards renewable energy, we have to include workers' rights in our thoughts and into policy, and support people who might lose their job because of the phase out of fossil fuels, in acquiring necessary skills to get jobs within the renewable energy sector. Globally, being for a just transition or just transformation means that the countries who have contributed most to climate change, they must support the countries who have not contributed to climate change as much, and support them to develop in a sustainable way and in their own understanding of development. So not approaching countries and say you have to become like we are, which has been a notion very present in the development discourse, but instead ask, what do you need? And support them needs-based in global policies. So we also need to not only have like one global policy for everyone, but adjust the policies for climate change based on different contexts and based on different needs from different social groups. Policies can range from carbon tax over a ban of fossil fuels, incentives for people and businesses to become more environmentally friendly through tax or through other incentives, investing in public transport, for example, in cities, banning cars from cities. Ideally, that goes hand in hand, investing in research and also investing in communication about climate change, just as a few examples for policies. Now, when we look at the policies, we need to reflect on who's actually making them. What we also see at the COP, or what we've spoken out earlier in the yin-yang session on gender and community, is that the group of people who are making policies that affect others are a rather homogeneous group. It's mostly men. It's mostly men that come from a certain economic and social background. And this has implications on what policies look like. And if we would open up the floor of policymaking and try to include much more diverse groups into it, give them access to and representation to policymaking, this can also change what comes out of it, of the policymaking process in the end. Just as an example, as Mandvi mentioned, I'm based in Vietnam, and last year we had a really big disaster of floods in central Vietnam, which at that time had been much more severe than actually the COVID pandemic here. And the board of the government who decided on what disaster aid need to be delivered to the communities affected most heavily by the floodings, it was 100% male. And as a result, the people, the communities in the flood areas, they didn't get any female hygiene products because men just didn't think that that was, like, it didn't even come to their mind that this was necessary, right? So if a woman would have been on the board, then it would have been more likely that women also would have gotten access to female hygiene products in this difficult situation. And that's not only true for women and men, this is true for much more for social economic status, for LGBTIQ groups, for disabled people, and much more. But of course, representation in policymaking is not everything. I mean, if we look, for example, at the US, we have a vice president who's a woman of color, Kamala Harris, but still she's implementing policies that are horrendous for migrant women. So representation is an important part, but it's not everything. At the same time, we need to also guarantee access to resources on community levels. And we also need to change narratives to understand what is going on from different points of views. So just to wrap my thoughts up and give the floor over to everyone in this room, is that we need to tackle the climate crisis, our policies in many sectors. It starts with energy policy, it's transportation, it's infrastructure, research, agriculture, and many more. It is a huge task, but it is also a chance to build a world that is not only ecologically sustainable, but which we can seek to strengthen marginalized groups towards a social ecological transformation. And challenges to achieve that is to build a broad stakeholder alliance, what Dina also mentioned in her presentation before, as we need governments, CSOs, businesses, all on board together for such a huge challenge and a huge transformation. And we also need to acknowledge that we need a change in our really basic systems, which means talking about power structures, which will not be easy, of course. So these are my thoughts on the issue of climate change policy, and I'm looking forward to hear what your response to that is, or if you would like to add anything.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much. I think you've given a very nice overview of, why we need the policy, what kind of policies are required, who is making the policy, and for whom, which is really important, which is often, overlooked in policy making. Some things are, I feel, perpetually missing, and nobody's taking cognizance of these things. I would at this point like to bring in Rishi Aggarwal, because Rishi is also commenting here on the chat, and I think there are certain things that Rishi feels that are missing from policy making, which needs to be addressed immediately. Let me quickly introduce Rishi. He's he founded the Mumbai Sustainability Centre in 2016 after more than 15 years of active involvement with Mumbai's environmental issues. Mumbai Sustainability Centre also founded Safai Bank program as a solution for extended producer responsibility in multi-layered packaging, which it's a very it's an out of the box practice, and we've been also using that as one of the best practices to create awareness, and also trying to bring scale to it through some green financing and stuff. But Rishi, what are your responses to Julia's or input, or what would you like to add here?
Yeah, thanks Mandvi for inviting me. That comment which I put in the chat box was specifically when Julia was at one section where she almost sounded apologizing from the industrialist west side towards the non-industrialized side. And I should just give a kind of a background that for almost 20 years, I've been at a polar end of India's climate change policy, which is common but differentiated responsibility. I've been a very vocal critique of Sunita Narayan. I think she refuses to even engage in a discussion on the points which I want to make. But I'm completely opposed of what started in 1991, actually from an original article by Anil Aggarwal and Sunita Narayan, which was climate justice, or this whole idea of equity. And unfortunately, what is happening in India is that the most heavy consumers of energy are the ones who are firing bullets from the shoulders of the most marginalized. And in the name of the most marginalized, we want to ensure that our carbon budget keeps expanding, where we keep doing absolutely wrong practices, absolutely wrong lifestyles, the same wasteful lifestyles which have been prevalent in America or Europe for the past 100 years. The Indian elite wants to now follow those lifestyles. Which is why they are influencing the transport policy towards more car-oriented policy, building, and the same people have hijacked India's climate policy, not for the poorest in India, but for their own carbon budget, so that they know that it shouldn't keep shrinking. So I think that is when I interjected with that part. And unfortunately, I think the COP the whole COP process is completely hijacked by corporate interests. It is no longer in the overall interest of the planet. It is purely interest of the corporate sector. And it's just a kind of, in fact, I refuse to participate with it also. I think it's a waste of energy for millions of people to participate in that process. I think all action should be local. I think people should fight the climate battle at the level of their municipal corporation. It has got nothing to do with what happens in Glasgow or Copenhagen or Paris. It is in the interest of the city to fight for a better, more equitable transport system, a better waste management system, better housing policy, better employability, etc. Those things have got nothing to do with what happens with the UN or COP. And unfortunately, we don't see the same youth in Mumbai who will be participating very enthusiastically in a Glasgow. Just to give you an example, I won't take long. Exactly a month back, we launched a campaign to declare a National Pedestrian Day so that we can focus on improving pedestrian infrastructure around the country. We started an online petition and it's got such a terrible response. I mean, we are trying to get maybe 100,000, 500,000 signatures, 1 million signatures. And here we have a piddly, I don't know what's the latest count, but maybe 10,000 signatures. And which means that we want more people to be participating, to make our cities pedestrian and cycling and public transport friendly. And it has got nothing to do with what happens in Glasgow. Because it's got nothing to do with even climate change, I would say. There is a climate change impact, but like my favorite term has been co-benefit. Nobody uses the term co-benefit at all. If you have improved sustainable mobility solutions, you have benefits which are here and now. Forget what will happen in 2050 or whether Tuvalu will go under the sea or Bombay will go under the sea. But if you have, and transportation sector has such huge, now India cannot say that no, in America, they built the expressways in the 1940s and the highway campaign and all of that. And Mr. Gadkari will keep giving that example and say, no, we need to first do that. And then we will talk something else. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. So I think that's why I said, I mean, we don't discuss the, so 70% of the needs are going to remain constant, whether it's somebody staying in a Berlin, in a Copenhagen, in a New York, in a London, or in Mumbai, or in a Bihar, in Azamgarh, or Gorakhpur, or Patna, or wherever, back of the beyonds. But 70% of human existence is going to be the same. How we shape that, there cannot be any disagreement about that. There has to be energy efficiency in London. The energy efficiency in London will be much different from energy efficiency in Gorakhpur. But you cannot say that as a principle, it's 100%. It's going to be applicable to the whole globe. So I think that's just when, I mean, we can keep going speaking. I don't want too much time.
No, thank you, Rishi. I know these are uncomfortable questions, but these have to be asked because, otherwise we carry on with business as usual. Also, as social development sector people, we carry on with the usual narratives and, sometimes lose sight of what, is happening on the periphery. So thank you for raising this. And I think when you were talking about, fighting the battles, I think we have just the right person here, Advocate Lara Jesani. She's been fighting many battles for us, I think, as for citizens. She's a practicing lawyer in Indian courts for over a decade and is currently an independent litigator with her primary practice based out of Bombay High Court and National Green Tribunal. She takes up cases of human rights violation, in particular constitutional, environmental development, and anti-corruption matters in the defense of human rights defenders. Also, particularly, she represents project affected communities and CSOs in matters pertaining to environmental concerns and violation. Lara, how do you see the COP process? I know we've been talking whether or not it is of any use, and how do you see these battles maybe forming up in the future, or whether those have, the right ammunition to be fighting these battles?
See, I'm equally critical of the entire COP process, and I don't think I'm not saying that these discussions are not important. And I think having a global understanding of what's happening, as well as setting out with measures to combat climate change in different ways is very important. But how are these processes actually conducted? For any global climate change policy to be effective, it is very important at this stage to look at its implementation, to look at whether it's actually going to make an impact at a local level, whether whether governments are going to respect this policy, whether the process of coming up with this policy itself is correct or not. I mean, some of the points have already raised, by Julia. Is this process inclusive? Is it guided by voices of women, of persons with disabilities, persons who are coming from affected communities? Do we have Dalits, Adivasis, denotified tribes? They are the ones who are actually even facing the impacts of disasters at a local level. They are the ones who are already at the receiving end of climate change. What are we talking about? Bombay going down in 2050. We are communities which are getting destroyed as we speak. We've seen more flood events than ever before. We've seen, massive amounts of issues with water. We've had soil erosion. We've had disasters in Uttaranchal, and many of the places that earlier did not see the same kind of disaster. And these are all a result of destructive development activities that have taken place over time. And to facilitate it, we also have, a domestic policy that has been steadily weakened. We've seen dilution of policies in the last few years like never before. So when we do talk about very, very, progressive climate change policies at a global level, where are we at the domestic level? How does the domestic policy really look? We are at a time when, we have amendments being introduced, at least a consultation paper has been brought out. We don't even know what the actual amendments are going to be, bringing in, very drastic changes to the Forest Conservation Act. We have the draft EIA 2020 in notification, which was brought in last year. It has been reintroduced now with 22, language translation. And the last date for giving comments is December 15th. Considering that, 2 million comments had been received from civil society objecting to the notification, one would have hoped that, it would have been withdrawn, amended, looked at differently, but now it's being brought out again in the same form in 2021. So we're looking, not just this, even our mining policies have been changed, our labor policies have been changed, FRA is not being implemented, the Forest Rights Act, the same thing with PESA. The object behind all of these acts that were community oriented, that spoke of public participation, that brought in, the question of consultation, of prior notification, which are the international environmental policies that are being discussed in all of these international forums, are actually being taken away at the domestic level. So how are we even, and then how do we also look at, whether whether the Paris Agreement has been successful or not, whether it has been implemented or not, how are we assessing, how we put the task? I mean, how are we assessing whether India has performed well? I mean, all of these are faulty at so many levels. So, I don't think that complete disengagement is the solution. I mean, I differ there. I feel that it is very important for us to assert our claim, to stake our space in these negotiations and discussions, to demand accountability, to demand solutions that are, that we can actually see on the ground, right? And for that, it is very important that these discussions are community-led. What's happening right now is this entire top-down approach doesn't even reach us in so many ways, right? It has to be the other way around. And we have to demand, implementation, compliance, monitoring. We have to demand mandatory and binding frameworks. Because right now, the only talk taking place in most of these spaces, whether they are the business and human rights space, or whether it is, on a lot of different forums on environment, or whether it is on, on solutions which are being presented in terms of biorenewable energies, and all of them are voluntary. Where is the mandatory framework? Where are we talking about binding treaties and agreements, where if the business does not perform, it does not ensure that their carbon energy use, if it does not shift, they cannot continue to do their business. I mean, where is that? Where are these, where is the justice when we have issues of violations? So access to justice is also at its lowest. I mean, I'm just wrapping up, but I just want to leave a thought with everyone. National green tribunals have not been functioning since 2016. The regional benches have not been here. We have seen, more because of the pandemic for the last 2 years, we haven't even seen the higher courts take up environmental cases. So where is this justice? We have to ask very hard questions, and we have to take a practical assessment of what's going on. We can talk policy level, we can talk, it's an endless discussion. And, and like you said, these are uncomfortable questions that we're all raising, but we have to be able to assess things as they are. We have to look at the local situation. We have to look at what's going on the ground, in our courts, in our independent institutions, and try and assess where our performance lies. So this is, I think, a very critical stage for us to raise these questions, and also to stake our claim to being very important defining factors in these negotiations and discussions that are taking place. We need to bridge that gap, and all of this is going to affect us. So it's really we who are at stake. It's our immediate environment, it's us, it's our family, it's our friends, it's our localities that are at stake. And that's why I think it's very important for us to claim that stake.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Lara. And also, I also feel that, like we also do it in our work, that there is a lot of commitment in intention. There are a lot of intentions, may be right or maybe misplaced, but maybe right. But what one really needs is commitment in action. And unless until it boils down to implementation and action, even of, we always say that India has best of policies, but if they are not implemented, they are not good. If there is no, monitoring mechanism, if there are no checks and balances, then best of the policies are no good for us. And I think for every walk of life, be it gender equality, or be it workers' rights, or be it climate justice, we are facing the problem of commitment in action from, I won't say it's just the government, but it's also, most all of us as individuals as well. The floor is actually open for anyone who would like to make a comment and talk from their perspective or from a stakeholder group that they are representing. I saw that there were a few questions in the chat box which have already been addressed. So I think it would be nice if people can just speak up what they're thinking or what their thoughts are about policy. Yes, Rishi.
Yeah, I was when Lara was mentioning that possibly in response to my point also of rubbishing the COP process, but the whole idea is that I think we are disproportionately engaging maybe at these even forget global, even in India we seem to have too much of discussion say happening at Delhi level, etc. Whereas I think the whole process whether at Delhi or at COPs will become so much more stronger. And we are at the almost 30th anniversary of the 73rd, 74th Amendment, where the whole idea was dissolution of power right till the lowest, this thing, Gram Panchayat and Zilla Parishad level. I work with so many Gram Panchayats in the Mumbai region itself on waste management. What a pathetic state of affairs. And then from that same state, the environment minister goes to Glasgow and gets an award that this is a state which is doing great work on climate change. Where is the great work? You come in Mumbai, within a 100-kilometer radius, I'll show you whether transportation policy, whether road safety, whether waste management, whether liquid, solid, anything, whether industrial emissions, industrial waste. and we are not having that discussion within a Mumbai metropolitan region, or look at the air pollution in Delhi. I mean, the least we can do is to prevent 1 lakh or maybe 10 lakh rappers from going to Gazipur and Bandwadi. But on a daily basis, we are sending waste over there that is getting burnt over there. So I think the more we are stronger at the foundation, I mean, if you have to make that pyramid, then all the big work is at the base of the pyramid. Right now we can't be creating that pinnacle of the pyramid and think of something. We really don't have any base to this whole COP process. I feel that's why it keeps collapsing.
Sure. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to. Hello.
Hi, Anasuya.
Can
Yes.
Hi.
Yes,
Can I
please
just
go
say
ahead.
something?
Sure.
Yeah, if you're talking of whatever policies or changes, if you see, just take an example of Delhi today. The way, oh, okay. Actually, I'm just in the vehicle. So I don't know. Okay. Can I just, sorry. So if we take an example of Delhi today, from what we are seeing, the kind of pollution level that has gone up, and yet we are there at Glasgow, I mean, just blowing our own trumpets. So what is it that we are really talking about? I agree with the participants who said, and Rishi sir, that it's really a very bad scenario. And if our policymakers who know nothing about ground realities are the ones who are going to be the ones implementing it, then Delhi is the biggest example today of the tiff between the central and the local government. So till these tiffs continue, I don't think we are going to head anywhere. So it is we, the stakeholders, the people who need to be stronger now and make them accountable in the coming times. It is only then that we can achieve, and very small baby steps that India needs to take first instead of really talking big.
Sure, thank you. I totally agree with you. We are a population of 1 billion, and even if each one of us take like single small step, it's going to make a huge difference. And also India, at least at the international level, has been talking about, environmental stewardship. I think this is,
yes, we are
the government doesn't step up, then we can definitely, as citizens, we can definitely step up to be.
Definitely. I mean, change begins with me is what I should first talk about.
Absolutely agree with you. I think with that, we can close the session, and thank you so much.
I just wanted to come in here.
Sure.
See, when we say that the change begins with me, and we need to do a lot at the individual level, I think it's also about how we are going to continue to monitor the policy, how we are going to raise uncomfortable questions, how much we are going to have as a critical engagement with the government in terms of the kind of policy changes that they are bringing about. I think there are a few different issues. One is, of course, the one of non-implementation of existing policy. The second is the manner in which the existing policies are implemented, like the faulty procedures. And the third thing which is there is how the policy itself is being dismantled. So that all these three spaces, I think that since we are talking about policy and we are in a session which is dedicated to policy, I think that becomes very crucial for us to understand how we need to engage at all these three levels. So our participation, in critical engagement is very crucial, because we have to demand, accountability, and we have to ensure that our criticisms with respect to the manner in which development is being proceeded with, the very definition of development, being faulty right now, and the manner in which these various indicators of environmental deterioration are coming up in front of us and they're not being dealt with, I think is crucial, and that is where we have to contribute at an individual level. But there is a lot that the state has to do. And there is a lot that we have to make the businesses do. So we must not we must not forget that this accountability that we are demanding is of the state, and that this respect for the rights that we are demanding is from the businesses. So we can't shift everything onto us. What we can do is we can make them perform. That is, I just wanted to bring that into context when we were having this discussion.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean that we have to do everything, because in any case, I feel that we are doing everything And, this whole thing about, I also have a very strong objection to when people say that, when Mumbai floods are there, or Chennai floods are there, or Kashmir floods are there, that people were so resilient and, they brought about, the community helped and this and that. And it really agitates me. And I feel that, it is not citizens, it's not for citizens to be resilient all the time and to be tackling everything by themselves when we have like a elected machinery in place who should be actually stepping up and doing this. And in the first place, ensuring that, such things don't happen. So yes, totally with you on this. But I do feel that the government and the state has the duty to provide the framework within which we can perform, and that we need their stronger involvement there. Closing remarks from Julia, and then we will close the session.
Thank you. I actually also again lowered my hand because Lara said was what I actually also wanted to say, that yes, the individual level can be important, but it's in a really mutual relationship with the systemic level, and both, like if one is missing, we cannot achieve like real change. And sometimes, I mean, Rishi already mentioned my apologetic choice of words earlier. And that is also something I feel a little apologetic about, is coming from Germany, is to have brought this narrative of individualism being the solution for all into the world. And I think we need to understand that unless the people in power, and this power, which is a system of power, does not change, then it won't matter if we take a flight to our holidays or not.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Rishi. Thank you, Lara. Thank you, Anasuya, for sharing your experience and also your opinions here. I think it's given us a lot of food for thought. Also, I think some some stirring would have happened amongst the participants, and I hope that we can engage with further on these topics. With that, I would like to close the session, and I hand it over to Anand or Rahul.